It is a curiosity of dictatorships that they more often than not feel obliged to affect the trappings of democracy. The ne plus ultra of the phenomenon is of course the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, i.e. North Korea, a hereditary tyranny in which the mildest expression of opposition to the Kim dynasty is punishable by deportation to the salt pile if you're lucky. But North Korea is not alone in attempting to pass itself off as a democracy, for all that the disguise is as convincing as a giraffe in a penguin suit. The German Democratic Republic, i.e. the former East Germany, put up a wall to stop everybody from leaving and shot anybody they caught trying. The People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, circa 1987 to 1991, was the final form of a Soviet-backed military junta which murdered and starved domestic opposition, real and imagined, in the hundreds of thousands. The great socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, the former fiefdom of unlamented Libyan despot Muammar Gaddafi, was a personality cult consecrated to a lunatic.
Well, what is the question?
More curious still is the fact that so many dictatorships go to the bother and expense of holding elections.
Exit polls in Belarus indicate that longtime ruler Alexander Lukashenko has won the country's presidential election. Any meaningful opponents are in prison or exiled.
Belarus, for e.g., held a presidential election in January, which was won by the same bloke as every previous Belarusian presidential election dating back to 1994. One obliging stooge did stand as a putative rival candidate and followed the unorthodox campaign strategy of cheerfully declaring his unstinting support for the incumbent. If we are taking the Central Election Commission of Belarus seriously, and to be clear, we are not, this pretty clear exercise in self-preservation harvested 3.2% of the vote. Even Saddam Hussein, former Generalissimo of Iraq, used to hold presidential elections of a sort. Every so often, his fellow citizens would be presented with a ballot paper posing the single question, "Do you approve of President Saddam Hussein being the President of the Republic?" No alternatives were offered. In the 1995 vote, out of 8.3 million votes cast, a mere 984 replied no. In 2002, out of 11.4 million votes cast, not a single one demurred, which does not look good for those 984 dauntless iconoclasts of 7 years previously. All of which is by way of managing expectations re the general elections which have been announced for December and January in Myanmar. There have been times not long distant when general elections in Myanmar were generally regarded as a heartwarming triumph of people power. In 1990, after decades of military rule, Myanmar elected the National League for Democracy of Aung San Suu Kyi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize shortly afterwards, although by that time she was under house arrest, Myanmar's military having rethought the desirability of taking their orders from the Vox Populi.
One always wonders whether it's a good idea to want to win elections again and again.
Democracy was eventually restored, and in elections in 2015 and 2020, Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD won big. In February 2021, Myanmar's military, known as the Tatmadaw, decided that the democratic experiment had gone far enough and threw a coup d'etat. All of which has occurred against a backdrop of various insurgencies which, since the military seized power, have escalated into something hard to describe as anything other than a full-blown civil war. By the best guesses of most analysts, the Tatmadaw and its allies and proxies maybe hold half the country and have hung on to that much by singularly brutal means. The rest of Myanmar is presently carved up by largely ethnically oriented militias, including, but by no means limited to, the Kachin Independence Army, the Arakan Army, the Taang Liberation Army, the Chin Brotherhood Alliance, the Pa-O National Liberation Army, and the Danu People's Liberation Army. At which a reminder that you can usually apply to militia organisations with the word liberation in their name the same law about countries with the word democratic in theirs. Rendering matters even more confusing, there is a Karen National Army and a Karen National Liberation Army, who are on opposite sides. It may be tempting then to suspect that the Tatmadaw are holding an election in the hope that someone else might get asked to deal with this mess. That would be 1, inaccurate, and 2, a great deal more sympathy than the Tatmadaw deserve. As to why they are actually doing it, a pure-hearted conversion to the idea that the military is there to serve the government rather than the other way around can probably be ruled out. Though Myanmarese state media claims that 55 parties have already registered to run, the most significant, i.e. the National League for Democracy, has denounced the whole thing as a sham and vowed a boycott. It is far from impossible that the Tatmadaw anticipated exactly this, making the path to victory even wider and easier for their preferred mob, the Union Solidarity and Development Party, who will duly win, and by a margin which may not have much to do with the number of votes actually cast. Nobody will believe that Myanmar has suddenly become a democracy, and the Tatmadaw doesn't expect that anybody will. But a charade such as this enables other countries, and other companies, to pretend that Myanmar is a democracy when it suits them to do so. But the Tatmadaw are nevertheless taking steps to demonstrate the legitimacy of the endeavour. Earlier this year it was reported that Myanmar would welcome election monitors. From Belarus. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Miller.